Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us on the CCA California podcast. Good to be with you. Not another week, but good to be back with you for the first time in what, Tony? Like it seems like 6 months.
Oh, don't say that. We're not that far behind.
No, but definitely good to be back in the studio recording another podcast episode. Tony, how have you been?
Oh man, I've been good. I feel like this week, it's the end of August. I feel like I've done a bunch of fishing, not as much as I wanted to, but there's still time, I hope. But I feel like this last week, for me, it's been a lot of catch up and reorganizing and shifting from that first half of the year into the second half of the year. And all the fundraisers and all the fundraising and events that we have coming up and events that we are planning for next year.
Yep.
So, yeah, It's been good. It's been busy. I know if anyone who tries to get a hold of us, it's always we're busy, but there are many moving parts.
Yes,
Many moving parts.
For sure. And back by popular demand, Howie, Newport. Howie.
It is by popular demand. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, the people want their Howie. How have you been, man?
I've been great. Yeah, a lot going on. I mean, feel like this wild season, I don't know, kicks off with iCast and then a month before iCast, honestly. And then we're rolling out some new products and stuff this month and through the end of the year and planning for a couple more new ones at the beginning of the year. So it's busy time creating all the marketing collateral on my end and just making sure we're geared up, and we're busy always making improvements over there at Newport. And so, yeah, staying busy, been fishing a little. The fishing's just been absolutely outstanding with the amount of options and fish that are willing to bite. And there's always a little ebb and flow, but man, we've been treated to some special days. So I am pretty thrilled on that. And I'm looking forward to finishing out my season with a couple more solid days at least, or a handful.
Yeah.
I'd like that. I'd like it to be a handful.
For sure. Well, no special guests. Howie's a co-host and our homie, so I don't count him as a guest. But let's start on the fishing aspect. I know you've been fishing at least a little bit recently, going after some big bluefin. Overall, what would you say? How has the summer been for you fishing-wise?
It's been good. Just preparing for these product launches. I've got a solid mix, a little variety. Been fishing Barrett a bit, and that place it's always...
Tell us more.
That place is just magical. I mean, I feel like I'm fishing in a video game. Any way you want to catch them, it kind of works. And I feel like, the water has been really high this year. So there's been some new cover that's opened up and some offshore structure that's opened up that's been really, really fun to target. And so, yeah, fished a few times out there. The local fishing's been a little overshadowed by the islands and the big fish stuff, out west. And, but man, that local bass fishing has been so good. And we did a bit of it, on a recent content shoot. And, we had Lane Killian and Nick from, California Current on Instagram. We had those guys fishing off of, a product that we are launching. It's an NS, we call it the NS 130 inflatable skiff. It's designed as a fishing skiff, and we are launching that on September 5th. So we were getting all kinds of...
I think I saw like a preview of it.
If you go to newportvessels.com, on the top bar, there is a link to a little preview of the product, and you can sign up to get notified when it drops so that you can take advantage of being one of the first to get it. But so we were filming some content, and we did poke offshore a little bit and tried to make some magic happen on the local offshore banks. And we checked about 100 kelps that were dry aside from mackerel. Almost every single one of them had bait on it, but only one of them had one nice yellow on it, and I think Nick hooked one and got kelped, but that was about it. It was pretty dismal. So we gave that a half day and then came in and fished La Jolla. And man, the bass fishing, those guys were just psyched out of their minds. They were throwing A-rigs around and getting triples left and right, and just big brown clouds of bass just charging the boat, and it was pretty exciting. And those guys were super frothed up. So, but personally, I was just driving a camera boat that day. Personally, my fishing that I've been doing this year is, and kind of what I love to do is fishing that big bluefin stuff. And, I would say that in general, last couple seasons, we haven't had the foam stuff we've had, but if you're willing to go the distance, this big fish foam, like the 100 to 200 pound grade stuff, up foaming for hours on end is quite a sight to see. And it's just ridiculous. So it's been
in one word,
you're
ridiculous.
like, do I fish this or do I film this? What do I do? But
decisions.
But if you have a good system down for deploying a flyer into that stuff, it's been just absolutely instant and pretty catchable grade. Although I feel those middle to those middle grade, those like 150 to 180 pound fish are probably the most attitudinal of the bluefin. Like,
is that a word?
Yeah, I think it might be
attitudinal.
They need an attitude adjustment, each and every one of them, because they're tough.
Yeah,
they're like mean teenagers. They're just I don't know. I feel like those fish in that.
You said what range? 120 to.
Yeah, like 150 to 180, 100. Yeah. There's been a lot of that fish around 150 pounds. They're just angry.
It's like the fish that
I don't know.
The fish that are growing into their weight and they start to figure out how to use it.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. But they're pretty ornery fish. So that stuff's treated us well. I haven't really fished that Coronado Island stuff's been just biting off the charts and
consistently.
Yeah, it's been a couple months now, it seems like, and that's awesome to see. But I'm gonna make it down that way tomorrow.
Nice.
And do a little fun fishing down there. So, but yeah, the summer of fishing has been good. Just getting it while I can amongst kind of kids and all the stuff that's going on in life, working and everything. Yeah. But yeah. Nice. Nothing to complain about. I feel very fortunate. I think I've said this before on the podcast. I'm not even really interested to travel to fish. If I have time to go somewhere to fish, I'd rather just stay home and fish. It's
easier.
Well, and it's pretty dang good. This time of year is hard to beat. Yeah. It's not the same flavor as fishing in the Southeast. I think that flats fishing and mangroves fishing and stuff is super cool and fun. But if I've got time to fish, I'd rather not go anywhere. I'd just rather fish at home.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Tonie, you've taken some fishing trips lately.
Yeah.
Especially one on the Searcher.
I did. Yeah. I had
How was it?
It was good. It was a lot of fun. I haven't been on a trip longer than 2.5 days in couple years. A while. As a passenger. Let me clarify. As a passenger, strictly passenger. But that was last week, and we have seen a lot of wind offshore right now recently, and it was tough getting out there. Getting pounded, going 10 knots, trying to haul all the way out to Cortez. It's, for those of you guys that go on boats, have your own boats, have been fishing recently, anywhere from overnight boats to long range, you're making that haul out there. It's not, you really have to commit. You have to full send a trip like that. Yeah. High risk, high reward trip. But there's a little bit of wind, and we were able to get some yellowtail in the dark, which was pretty cool, on dropper loops. And I think I had a 16-ounce weight with super long dropper loop and a 6.0 J hook on there. And if you had squid, you were most likely going to get bit if your boat was able to make squid. Squid was getting bit during the night, like 3 to 5 o'clock. We had a couple schools swim through. I got bit off a sardine, but I realized that everyone who was fishing next to me, everyone had a squid on. So I thought, well, I'm going to be the one person that's different in my zone. So I put a sardine on and boom, I got bit a couple times. So I just stuck with it. That was pretty cool. That was probably some of the biggest yellowtail I've caught start to finish. So that was pretty cool for me. Caught some bluefin. I think the last full day that we were there before we had to come back was, in my opinion, like the best kind of plunker bite on the anchor, fly line fishing for bluefin all around the boat to where they're just constantly popping up. You're following the birds and you're not being hassled by a bonita or anything else. It's just straight bluefin from 20 to 60 pounds all around the boat. And that to me is like my favorite type of fishing for bluefin. 30 pound, just pitching baits out. So much fun to me.
We were talking about this the other day. It's the technical aspect too of fishing like that on the anchor makes you feel good about yourself when you're doing it right, and because it's not the easiest style of fishing in the world, and there's that balance of keeping a bait out long enough to get bit, but making sure you've got a fresh bait on.
Yeah.
So
and then you got a bunch of wind too, like on that day. The wind would shift, the boat would shift to one side, everyone's fishing along the same side, and then the wind would shift, and then everyone's baits would just start kind of floating back, and everyone would have their line sack, and it's like, oh, we got to go to the other side. So it's a lot of being on top of the current and always trying to be in the right place at the right time, intentionally paying attention.
Definitely got to stay engaged, right? Yeah. I think that's the kind of what makes it fun, that style of fishing. But you're not gonna do well if you're that person leaning against the rail, resting on your elbows. You gotta be ready to shift with the conditions. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, the week before your trip, Tonie,
you had your trip. We gotta talk about that.
Yeah, I did a 2-day. My family does an annual 2-day every year in August. And it was fun. It was on the Grande. And
I know that boat.
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I was going to say. I thought you were familiar with it. So it was super fun. It was very similar to your trip, Tonie, to where it was basically going out to Cortez and dropping the pick, and it's just a steady pick. And it was interesting. We got there like at maybe 9, 10 o'clock a.m., and then dropped the pick, and then took a little bit of time for things to get going and all that. But it was almost exclusively yellowtail at first, and then all of a sudden something switched, and it was just nothing but bluefin.
Did you get your yellowtail during the day or at night? I can't remember.
During the day.
During the day. On a yo-yo or?
On a yo-yo.
Yo-yo.
Yep. And my arm about fell off after yo-yoing for so long. But ultimately, it was fun. It was really cool. For the people who... I had a guy that was a friend of mine that right next to me, and he was dedicated to the yo-yo as well. And he just had the blue and white, whereas I was fishing scrambled egg, and he was getting bit like left and right. He probably pulled away at least 5 or 6 yellows. It was ridiculous.
They wanted the blue and white.
I guess so, yeah.
I got a question for you guys. What's your favorite bite? Yo-yo iron or surface iron?
Surface. For sure.
Like specifically for yellowtail?
Well, I guess, yeah.
In general, or?
Iron fishing for yellowtail. What do you prefer? A good yo-yo bite? Like a good heavy yo-yo bite? Or watching that fish splash on a surface iron?
Watching.
Yeah, I will say, though, I've caught more fish on a yo-yo than I have a surface iron, but that's by design because I feel like a 10-foot rod for me, even on a skiff, that's a lot of work for me to do it. So I'll catch my one or two and I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm calling it a day. But I think the reaction of getting them to bite on the surface is epic. It's like watching a kite bite.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're just fan casting an area and you get a blind strike on a surface iron, that's pretty damn exciting. But in general, I feel like the yo-yo bite's a little more of a surprise a lot of times just because of the nature of the way you fish it. And I think it's hard to beat.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, a visual strike is always just so awesome. But I really like that yo-yo bite. That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind yo-yo fishing. It's a lot of work, but ultimately, I think you're right, Howie, to where that's definitely more of a shock and surprise. It's like, oh crap, there it is. Whereas you can kind of visually see and you can kind of see, sometimes in
a lot of cases, you got some indicator. Yeah. You're almost expecting the bite a little more.
Yeah, blowing up on your jig. And
I was gonna say too.
What about for you?
I like a yo-yo bite. I think but it depends.
I like the satisfaction of being able to say like, okay, I followed the birds and then I chose this jig and I know this jig and this current or this swims a certain way. Like I like the technical aspect of knowing that like at least I think I chose all the right things and it just happened to work. I think at the end of the day, like I think at the end of the day, if they're hungry, they're gonna eat it. Yeah. Does it really matter what color you have? I don't think so. My OG surface iron jig has no paint on it, so I don't think color really matters. Yeah. But I like all the effort. Yeah. And energy it goes into.
Yeah, I was gonna say too. Yeah, I do get tired of throwing those longer rods as well. It's a lot of work, and for a long time I was throwing surface iron on an 8-foot rod, and I found it to be like pretty comfortable. I mean, I'm a smaller person, and I think a lot of times those 9.3 to 10-foot rods it's a little better suited for a bigger framed person a lot of times, depending on the rod. Yeah. But if you have a rod that has a soft enough tip on it that's 8 foot or 8.5 feet, like I kind of like that. I think I don't know. I wouldn't shy away from that. I think especially also for like somebody who's kind of starting out, getting comfortable casting a surface iron, I feel like that's a little bit more appropriate. Yeah. Too, but that's just me. I don't know.
That's interesting. Now that I think about it, or now that you said that, so an 8-foot rod, I would consistently throw on, like if we were penguin fishing, like Tonie Reyes a month ago.
Yeah, because it's what you bring.
Yeah, it's what you bring, and you don't need a 9-10-foot stick. Yeah. Whereas on a sport boat, I'm always consistently bringing a 9-foot rod. And now I'm kind of thinking.
Just for like surface irons, or does that include like your fly line rods too?
No, it's just a surface iron. Surface iron, hard baits. But if I'm throwing a stick bait, like a SP minnow or something, it's usually, now that I think about it, it's actually on an 8-foot rod. Mm-hmm. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. You never know. Might help you get in more casts comfortably. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I cast a 9'3" jig stick. That's but
it's your sweet spot.
Yeah, but there's trips down in Cedros, I took just an 8-foot rod. It was that UC, an 8-foot UC Del Mar, like a 30 to 60 pound rod. Super versatile stick, but I probably made 2,000 casts with that rod, and I felt like I was pretty dialed by the end of the trip. It felt pretty good. So I don't know. I think sometimes about going back down to an 8-foot rod for a jig stick. I think I feel more comfortable that way.
Which one? That's the question.
Yeah, I know. Something like that. Something with enough tip to where you can cast it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I learned how to cast on a 9-foot. So I had a 90J and we had CUIs on the boat and we had a bunch of different rods that I would use, and I always felt over encumbered with different
nice word.
jig sticks. Well, like my hands are small, right? And I'm a short person and I don't have the upper body strength an average man does. So you have to take all these things into consideration when I'm looking for rods and like where the point of leverage is and how I can manipulate it. Like there's all these things that I think about. But I went from using like a 90J and I felt like every single time I had to cast, and maybe it was just this rod in particular, I felt like the tip was just a little bit too parabolic to where I really had like, if I wasn't using 80 to 100% energy each time, like I might as well just put the rod back.
Wasn't loading it up.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a little bit too soft. And my go-to is always like a 6X. It's usually a heavier jig. But then I started using a 10-foot rod this year. And I will say that the amount of effort it takes to get that jig the same distance using that rod, I'm using less energy just because of the dimensions of the rod, and I'm able to just lob it out longer. But then once you do hook up, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Something I've picked up over the years too, just like, I don't know, that's maybe my last comment on casting surface iron, but I feel like I've taken note of how far my casts go when I put in and this is totally, a lot of the times, rod dependent. But if you have a good rod that's built to cast a lure, my casts are going just as far if I'm putting in like 70% strength or power into my cast as it is if I'm really trying really hard to intentionally. It's like swinging a baseball bat really hard.
Yeah.
The important thing is making good contact. So you know what I mean? So if you're like taking the time, allowing the rod to load up, and almost in your mind it feels like you're just lobbing it. I've noticed that the casts go just as far as when I'm putting all my might into it, you know? That's really more about technique and like, noticing, okay, the rod's loaded up, where you're kind of like releasing the jig at, what point in the cast. And I don't know, I would say like if you want to cast a jig all day, don't feel like you have to make every cast with 110% effort, you know?
Yeah.
Because I do have a tendency to like, especially in the beginning of the day, I'm like fired up and then you start getting a little tired and you're you notice you're putting less effort into the casts, but then you're like, damn, my casts are going just as far, maybe even farther. Because I don't know what it is, but yeah, don't feel
physics.
Like you. Yeah, don't feel it is physics. Yeah, you're right. But I guess the moral of what I'm trying to say is like, don't feel like you have to put everything you've got into every cast. You're not going to last very long that way.
I've learned to where if I'm I'll call it overcasting, to where I'm just putting way more effort than I need to in a cast, something always goes wrong.
Backlash.
Yeah.
Backlash, especially. Backlash for sure. And that way it's like I just have to keep myself calm. It's like, okay, it's fine. There might be fish going, like just making cartwheels and all that stuff off the bow, but you just got to just make a normal cast. That's it.
That's when I just carefully and quietly put my rod away and just grab my 40-pound fly line. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do this really quick.
I love fishing bait.
Yeah.
I think that is a little bit of a lost art, or like, I don't know, maybe not, but people are really zoned, like really obsessed with artificials, but there is the good bait anglers are there's a serious art to bait fishing. And I really like that.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that has to be my bread and butter.
Yeah.
I think like if I had to choose one thing that I'm like a little bit more than moderately good at compared to my other fishing abilities, I think fishing a live bait is.
We've talked about this
there.
before.
Yeah, I think we have.
You've probably told the listeners before, but what's your go-to 40-pound bait outfit?
I have a go-to 30-pound.
What's your go-to 30-pound bait outfit?
It's like rod and reel and everything. Yeah. It's a UC. It's like a RCE. It's like it's an 8-foot United Composites rod, and it's a 25 to 40-pound rod, and I have a Talica 10 with 30-pound braid, and I put 30 fluoro on it only.
That 30-pound braid is just effortless.
There's something
Going through the water.
There's something about it, and last week on my searcher trip, I had a 25-pound setup, a 30, I had a 40. Yeah, I had a 40, and then, I had I had a jade rod and I had a cow rod, whatever. So as far as my fly line outfits go, everyone on the boat was saying they were getting bit on 50, they were getting bit on 60. Like, it wasn't quite wide open, but if you had the right bait, you could get bit, right? It's one of those things. But it was just steady, like picking a couple at a time. So people were getting bit on 40, 50, 60. I was fishing every single one of my fly line setups, and I could only get bit on 30. Only get bit on 30.
Yeah.
Couldn't get bit on 40, couldn't get bit on 50. Everyone's like, yeah, I caught it on 50, I caught it on 60. And I'm sitting here with my 40-pound, like, what the heck? 25, I think I had my 25-pound rod trying to fly line.
Everyone had to go down to 25 on my trip.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That's when it gets challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you start losing them.
So funny story from that trip. I swear I was on the bow like yo-yoing, like I said earlier. Every time it seemed like when I was looking to my right down the rail and all that, every single freaking time, I kid you not, my dad was hooked up. Every time.
That's not good.
Yeah. And I love my dad and all that.
Your feelings were hurt?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. I yelled like towards him, but like loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm like, that's just plain rude. That's just rude. You're using my setup. I get everything all dialed in, and then you're catching the majority of the fish. What the hell? That's crazy. But every single time, it just luck was on his side. That's all it is.
Hey,
It just feel like that sometimes, Chris.
He fishes once a year on that trip. That's it. So I'll throw him a bone. That's okay. But it just hurts my feelings.
The fishing gods were on his side.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly. But it's nice to have been out fishing this month more so than all the other months, it seems like.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we really only get, especially with our job, Tonie, where you really only get maybe 1 or 2 months a year, or there's really nothing too much on the calendar where you have some opportunities to actually go.
Hold on. Let's go back a second here.
Oh,
because you said the summertime, we have time. And then I found myself this summer traveling more than I did the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's true.
But I agree with you. I think this year in particular, it was kind of a weird, slow start in general. And I feel like the last 6-7 weeks or so has really been consistent. And boats are going out. Everyone's going out. Islands are hidden. Out west is hidden. Clementi's hidden. There's all these spots that are
so many opportunities.
Yeah, they're just producing more consistently than they were the whole beginning 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
This season's just giving everybody a little warm up on other styles of fishing outside of bluefin. Remember how fishing used to be?
Mm-hmm.
As a charter boat operator, the island fishing was the bread and butter. Yeah. August and September were the highlight, the highliner tuna months, but if you didn't know how to fish the islands properly, it's kind of giving everybody a little reminder that there's other things to fish for.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think this year more than ever, it's really almost like a quote unquote normal-esque year, to where fishing has been just off the charts the last, I don't know, 10 years, more or less.
And it did. Tonie said it. It got off to a later start, like a more traditional.
It kind of normalized a little bit.
Was it It was middle of May before things got really rolling this year.
It's probably like
borderline
June.
after 4th. I feel like 4th of July, around that time, like the first 2 weeks of July, it was kind of scattered a little bit. Like it was slow. January, February, March, April. Like April, May, June, where in the past we've seen like big ones locally, full speed every day. Mm-hmm. The last year and a half, it's like, okay, that slows down. It's a little like we get scattered fish here and there that swing through, but the water's still kind of cold, but they're still here, but then they're not biting. Yeah. And then it's not until that first 2 weeks of July. Now majority of the fleet's going out, everyone's searching for it, realizing there's meat here, but it's only in this area because of this system. I think it all those things.
Well, how it used to be. I mean, when, God forbid, the albacore came years and years ago, it was 4th of July to Labor Day. That was your window, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some boats were running through October and stuff, but it was July to October was the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now people, the last 5 years, it's like, all right, we got to be ready to rock March 15th.
I know. I remember like in 2018.
We just stopped fishing at Christmas.
Exactly. I remember like 2018, 2019, maybe like almost the beginning of the season was the yellowtail bite at the islands. And that would be like right around the shows, like February, March. Yeah. And that was really like the starting point. And then sure enough, a month later, everyone would be going on those exploratory trips for bluefin. So we knew they were somewhere. And then nowadays it's just, I'm glad that the islands are biting the way that they are in the summer, but it never used to, like over the last 10 years, we never really been island fishing. Everyone's been just basically going offshore. You really wouldn't, you really didn't have that opportunity.
It's cyclical.
Yeah.
I feel like it's all cyclical.
Those bluefin, I don't know when exactly they showed up, but I feel like my main fishing mentor, aside from my dad who introduced me to fishing and all that, but Tom Paterno, he would always take a trip out to the 43 in June, and there'd be bluefin there. Granted, probably the luckiest guy I've ever met in my life. But he'd just be like, oh, yeah, they're there. We got to go or something. And he'd go catch them. And so, I don't know. Maybe they were there earlier and nobody was looking or something. But
so, Howie, that actually segues into a great topic in which I want to bring up. So I did some random Googling last night on things that we can discuss in the podcast because, we do our homework here on the podcast.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what Google came up
Google.
with.
Yeah. Here's my question to both of you. What is your favorite childhood memory fishing? Like if there's a one instance to where you have a clear shot memory, or even it could just be something that you always did.
Do you have one, or do you want me to go?
You if you have it locked in, go for it. I gotta think about it.
Yeah, there's a couple. One that really stands out is every year in August, growing up, we would get a campsite at Campland on the Bay. My dad would come down, he'd set the family up, and we had this old motorhome that was like, it required like 2 weeks of wrenching on every year just to get from where we lived down to Mission Bay. And anyways, we'd post up for like at least a month every summer and just hang out. And that's kind of that was where I got my main saltwater exposure as a young kid. And we did everything from fishing like slow trolling sardines on the kelp line at La Jolla to fishing sand bass at the IB flats and all that good stuff. But I remember one year that really stands out to me was there was a yellowtail bite off of Point Loma, just basically in front of the OB pier. And every afternoon, a lot of days my dad would get up at 3-4 in the morning. He'd drive to work, he'd work, and then he'd come back for the afternoon, and he'd get back 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And every day for the time we were there, we were just slow trolling sardine on the kelp line in Point Loma and just smashing yellowtail. Huh. And that was it was just every afternoon. It was just, that's how it was. They were just there. And that was kind of and there wasn't really anybody doing it. We just kind of figured it out by chance and just kind of kept going back and going back and going back and kept scoring on yellows. And I just remember that very vividly. So I would say that's probably the one standout memory. And I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old maybe at that time. Nice. The yellows seemed big. Yeah. I don't know.
Were they just rats?
Maybe, but yeah. So that's mine.
Weren't we just talking about that before the podcast too, where it's when you're a kid, everything, there's just grandeur to life when you're a kid, and then you look back on it and you're like, yeah, that 50-pounder was really 2 pounds.
Yeah. I know. I probably got amped on a lot of 5-pound yellows, but
hey, that's what brought you here. That's what counts.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
Tonie?
I have a very interesting, the first story that pops into mind is such a weird story, but
should we go pop some popcorn first?
No. It's nothing that crazy. Sorry, but no. I think for me, I just it wasn't always fishing for me. It was always the ocean. It was always fish. It was always the inhabitants, and that to me just it grabbed a hold of me at a very, very young age. I mean, even going to aquariums and looking at the fish just suspended in the water and just the idea that these fish just swim freely in the ocean and we can't see them and gravity and all that just blew my mind at a young age. So for me, I think fish were always just it. For me, it was always the thing. I was always fish girl. You know how there's horse girls in high school? I was the fish girl. So, that's cool. But, with my dad being up in Alaska since I was 7 years old or so, fishing was always there because it was such a big part of his life and his serenity, And so seeing his freshwater gear, it was always kind of there. And it wasn't until we went up during the winter time, and I remember he was showing us, I think it was just me, but he was showing me all these different lakes and streams he would go to, and because, it's wintertime in Alaska, it's just completely frozen over. I remember seeing this trout that was probably a 6-7 pound trout, but it had its head and its tail completely chewed off from a bear. And it was frozen over. And I just remember looking at that thing and thinking, Dad, this is what you're looking after? There's bears here. You consider this fun? My dad's yeah, it's fine. We're here. So I think, I don't know why you said, the first memory of fishing. I don't know why that story just popped into my head, but it was the idea of, you're out here. Granted, it's the wilderness, but you're out here. You're doing something that causes, so much peace and serenity in your life, and it's that whole mentality of freedom in a certain way, that duality of life, that give and take of life, and that hit me as a young teenager. This is cool. I can do this.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've never experienced real backcountry Alaska fishing, but it's on the list.
It sounds like we should make a field trip up to Alaska. Tonie, you know some people, right?
Yeah.
You definitely want to walk around in the backcountry in Alaska with a rifle on your
That's what I
shoulder.
Hear. It's
right?
kind of advised.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you
never know.
You'd be considered an idiot if you didn't.
Well, I don't want to have to deal with a grizzly bear.
Yeah,
definitely not with my hands. There's no dealing.
I mean, you have a shot with a black bear. It's the grizzlies that.
Yeah, I'm not worried about black bears. Grizzlies freak me out.
What's that one movie with Leo DiCaprio?
Which one?
No, okay, well, the one with the grizzly bear or was it Alec Baldwin? About the guy who was in Alaska and he was videotaping it and he comes across this bear and like eats him alive and it's all on film.
Grizzly Man? Well,
Grizzly Man is one, but there's another one.
That's like his documentary.
Maybe it was that
guys. One. It's wild.
Interesting.
Yeah, this guy is living with the bears. He's one of them.
Okay. I'll have to
it doesn't last
put
forever,
that on
though. Timothy Treadwell is the guy's name.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll have to put that one on my list.
And
it's a not safe for work.
He's a special man.
Not safe for work.
If you're scared of bears, don't watch it. But it's a crazy story. I would recommend checking it out.
Is it a book?
Probably a book. It's a documentary for sure.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes, he's the one that had the videotape. Mm-hmm. Oh, Chris. Oh man,
movie night.
This one is, for lack of better terms, gut wrenching.
Oh boy. Oh bear. Sweet.
What's yours, Chris?
I think we briefly touched on it earlier. I have two. So one of which is that charter that I was talking about, the one with my family. And so I've had, it first got started, I'd say 20 years ago with my grandfather. And it really stemmed off of just one of his fishing club trips. And so he basically realized that he was basically providing half the people that were on that charter. So he just said, screw it, I'm just going to do my own. And so 20 years ago. And so it started with him. And then I think probably 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, then my dad took it and chartered it with his friends. And then 2 years ago, or last year, he gave it to me. And so I've been just kind of...
Who puts the deposit down?
I do. The charter master typically does. Yeah. It doesn't, it hurts a little bit, but it's okay. Yeah. But ultimately, I think that's one memory because I remember going, I think my first trip was when I was like 11 or 12 or something. And I just remember just fishing with the guys. It was cool. It was just that annual trip that I, as a kid, always looked forward to because it was amongst family and friends and all the people that are on that trip either know my grandfather, my dad, or myself. And it's super cool. And it's still happening to this day, which is nice. Second memory, and I think this is really more stemming off of my whole introduction to saltwater fishing, was when my grandparents bought the boat, and it was up in Channel Islands Harbor in Oxnard. And really, almost every single summer, I'd go up there for months, basically any time that I was not in school, and we'd go fish the Channel Islands almost every day. And, I mean, we've spent weeks at a time, maybe a week at a time at most, like off of Santa Cruz Island and Anacapa and fishing the backside and all that. Yellowbanks. I remember catching my first white sea bass at Yellowbanks. Just a ton of bass on the backside of Anacapa, all good stuff. Basically just doing a whole bunch of exploratory trips and all that. And sometimes the weather was very, very good. Other times it was very, very bad and miserable. Yeah. There's been a couple close calls in my lifetime where we've almost flipped over and, it was just a bad situation.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah. If people think the crossing between, say, Dana Point and Catalina is bad, it's nothing compared to freaking Santa Cruz Island and Channel Islands. Even Santa Barbara and Santa Rosa too, to an extent.
Yeah, that's
but-
gnarly.
Yeah. So other than that, I think those are really, and it's not really a specific memory. It's just me always going up there every summer and really just ultimately going up there and fishing for 3 months at a time and then coming back and doing it all over again the next year. And I think I started when I was, when was that? 10, maybe 11 years old, more or less. Before then, it was really all like maybe freshwater fishing, like once in a couple years, more or less. Just wasn't there. But then as soon as they got the boat and I was saltwater fishing, it was like, bam, I'm hooked.
Hooked got a hold of me too.
Yeah. All of us. But next question. And this one's kind of an odd one, so bear with me.
Uh-oh.
Most random thing you've Googled regarding fishing?
Oh, gosh.
That's a hard question.
That is hard.
I thought it was going to be fun, and I'm sure it probably will bear some interesting answers from both of you.
Most random thing?
Most random, weirdest,
Gosh.
something completely... Tony, I can see you're going through your Google history.
I am. I think I have to look.
And quite frankly, I still need to think about this one too, because usually Google's not my first resource when it comes to fishing.
I don't have anything like weird that stands out.
Let me look at my
Or
YouTube
bizarre.
history.
Oh, YouTube counts too.
Stand by.
I will say, yeah, I don't know. Probably like the most out there stuff is like stuff about moon related stuff or current height, like that kind of stuff. But that's just kind of pretty normal, dry stuff.
But it does relate to fishing though.
I had to, I got to be honest, there was a podcast kind of in the early days of this podcast where Nate Winicky was on here and him and Kevin were going nuts about bass fishing stuff and books. And
that was a while ago.
Although I grew up on a bass lake, I just kind of messed around. Like I threw crankbaits around and fished a Texas rigged worm here and there and stuff like that, threw fish jigs and things. But Nate and Kev were talking about stitching for bass.
What?
And I was like, what is stitching? And I felt like ridiculous that I didn't know what stitching was. But I had to Google that one, and then I went down a big rabbit hole.
Okay, what is it? What is it?
Stitching for bass is where you cast a bottom contact lure out, a worm or a craw, anything. And there's a technique that you use where you pick up and retrieve the line by this like alternating pinky and thumb, pointer finger and thumb. And it gives the bait a unique crawling action on the bottom. And some of the biggest bass in history have been landed with using this technique.
Huh.
So that's what stitching for bass is. Look it up. There's books about it and stuff.
On just a normal setup.
Yeah,
something.
It could be any setup.
Like could you do it on a
like a finesse? You can do it on spinning rod. Yeah.
So you just let it down on the bottom, and then you're basically stitching it on the way back up.
Yep. Like back toward you, right?
Okay, so making a cast.
Staying on the bottom, and it's just crawling along.
Interesting.
And there's something about, like, number one, detecting the bite becomes easier, especially with Spectra, if you're using Spectra. But it also is just it's like next level finesse fishing.
Huh.
Yeah, talk about next level.
Yeah.
Huh.
So check it out. I don't know. I wasn't familiar with it, and so I had to Google that. Thanks, Nate. Huh. I'm never going to use that technique.
Nate is a wealth of information, though.
That is true.
He is a wealth of information.
Yeah,
that is true.
He's a little bookworm. That guy.
Yeah.
Love you, Nate.
We haven't heard from Nate in a long time.
He's busy fishing.
I talk to Nate all the time. What are you talking about?
I haven't heard from Nate.
I report to Nate.
Yeah. He's doing the social media stuff over at BD, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I looked at my search history and it's nothing real exciting. But I will say that there's a common theme in my search history, and I go through these kicks of like, I'll get an idea in my head and then it's just like rabbit hole until I get bored of it or have watched all the videos. So like I'll go through sailboat restorations, like sailboat catamaran restorations, like could I do it? Can I afford it? Mm-hmm. How would I do it? What do I need? So I'll go through that. So it's not necessarily fishing, but it's like hobby related things. Mm. But as far as fishing goes, like I'm always curious to other species, right? So like I don't bass fish often. I've caught bass, but I'm not a bass fisherman by any means. So like that's usually the springtime for me before the season would start. So I have bass videos on here. I have Lake Okeechobee, like Scott Martin, my boy Scott Martin. I've seen so close. Many of
that close.
I should have just ran up to him and shook his hand. Scott, if
we
you
have
ever,
the opportunity.
You'll have another shot at ICAST next year.
If you ever listen to
this
podcast.
Us. He literally just walked by us. I'm like, you want to go? Just a little bit of hesitation. We lost him.
They move fast, man. Yeah. Those guys move fast at a show like that.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. But I surf fishing. I have a kick on surf fishing on here. So it's anything but what I do typically. Mm-hmm. I'll go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, surf fishing is one of those things I haven't dedicated a ton of time to, but I would like to. I'd like to get more into it just because it's accessible and less time consuming.
We owe cool our friend Benji Kim a call.
Benji.
We owe him a call.
We haven't forgotten about you.
All three of us have to go hit him up for a session.
I'm down to learn a thing or two.
Yeah.
Morgan, he's my main fishing partner. He grew up in South Africa, and that's pretty much what he did there. There's a lot of, surf fishing in South Africa is a different ball game. Mm-hmm. But he's a very good surf angler. And I should learn a thing or two from him.
Yeah, but it's easy.
Tell me all your tricks, man.
Yes. Next one. I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not, but I'll ask it anyway. A belief within our industry that you disagree with.
A belief.
Either a belief, or I'll open up to like a practice or a common theme that everyone seems to think that works, but you really don't think so.
This is an easy answer for me.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, I think probably even on this podcast, but I highly disagree with experienced people holding information back because, not that you need to divulge every secret that you have, but if you're a figure who has an opportunity to teach somebody a lesson about fishing or how to be a better angler or a better boat driver or a more respectful angler around others, I just think that sharing information, and we're getting better, but sharing information makes everybody more knowledgeable and able to fish better and more respectfully around one another. And I think that there's still a lot of work to be done to shift the mindset from, I don't want you to know what I know, to sharing the information so that we can all work better together. I think that's like a big one for me. I mean, I could be better about sharing information. I'm not saying it takes time and it takes effort, right? But there's so many things that happen on the water where it's one person yelling at another person, and the person who's getting yelled at literally has no idea what they did wrong. And so I think that, I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's something we can do better.
To be better teachers.
Be better teachers. Like for the experienced folks in the industry to be better teachers to the lesser experienced. And there's a lot of resources out there, but I think that just taking those opportunities to teach instead of critique is or put down is something we could get better at. It's not a very, I guess I'm speaking more toward this is specifically Southern California saltwater, or some bass fisheries are very territorial and people just get mad at another person instead of teaching a valuable lesson that may help that situation be avoided in the future. And so, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's just, you have to take the time. But there's a lot of, there's a lot more people these days. Well, there's a lot of new anglers these days that really need those lessons. And I just, sometimes it blows me away. Here's an instance where I was guilty. Granted, it's a little tough when you're offshore and there's wind and all sorts of other things happening. It's hard and you don't know what radio channel somebody has on or if they have a radio or what, but we were fishing that big bluefin northwest of Clemente, out in no man's land, basically, where that fish has been hanging out. And I think at first it was us and one other boat, I don't know, 2 miles away or something. And at this point in the day, in any direction you looked, as far as you could see, there was fish up. Mm-hmm. And a boat rolls in and maybe wasn't aware that we had a kite out or whatever, but pulls in between our boat and our kite, and they all get on the bow and start casting lures at 200-pound bluefin, which, hey, some guys can, I'd rather catch a 200-pound bluefin on a 30 wide and not on a popping rod. That's just me. But
I agree.
I mean, I do want to check that off my list, but that just is straight pain.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure if I want to go through that.
So anyways, but I just felt like we got mad, right? And stayed in control, but why did those people think it was okay to do that? Not just park between us and our kite bait, but between us and the fish. And there was miles in every direction, fish up, you could see with your eyeballs. So I just don't understand. Maybe they were, but you know what I mean? Instead of just saying, those people don't know what they're doing. I don't know.
Maybe we could have having grace.
Maybe we could have tried to pull up next to him and say, hey, when this is the setup, this is how you should approach or something, So I don't know. We're guilty of it too. I am, but
common sense would also dictate.
That helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that's a scarce commodity these days.
Yeah.
Common sense is not common.
No.
But yeah, I don't know. That was an extreme example, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I think that is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a weighted question, Chris, because, I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, I think the fishing industry is always changing. It's never stagnant. Like what was thought to be like the setup or the jig or fish straight mono with a, I don't know, one-aught J hook, whatever. Like that was the way to do it. And then it changed and how it became that way, and then it changed again and now it's one way. So I think a lot of people get stuck on like this is the way. I think there are certain instances where things should be done a particular way, like whether it's rigging up your tackle or setting up your rod. Like there are correct ways to do things and there are incorrect way to do things, but I also believe there are many correct ways to do something and there are many incorrect ways to do something. But yeah, I think to what Howie was saying, there should be, I think, better awareness that the ocean is not a forgiving place and people should respect it on many ways, like from a boating aspect, from a person just enjoying the beach, sitting on the sand aspect.
Safety. Mm-hmm.
Safety, yes. I've glassed a lot of skiffs at the islands that for sure do not have a radio. They don't have any PFDs. Like they're just little things that I feel like people don't think about, or they take it for granted, or they think, oh, it's just 10 miles away. Things can happen so fast. You can run into another boat. You could be, literally anything could happen. You can run over something. You can run over a log. Oh. There's just so many things that could happen that I think there should be. This is why people need to take some kind of boater safety course that isn't just something online. It's like
I 100% agree with that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not good enough just to say, like, oh, I read this and then I signed it. Here's my information. Be educated out on the water.
Yeah. It's almost as if you're it's almost like to register a boat of a certain, like, power class or something. I don't know. To register a boat, you should have, like, when you get your driver's license, you take an in-person driver's test. Well, you take a class, but you have to pass a test. You have to drive in front of somebody and show them that you know how to drive. Don't you think that'd be like a pretty solid, it could be a half-hour thing, 20-minute thing, and some certified person comes on your boat and you take them for a spin and they ask you to pull up to a dock and they ask you to, I don't know, drop your anchor, have you perform some exercise on, safe practices on the water, like half-hour deal. You're in, you're out, and you can go register your boat now. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's just resources, man.
Yeah, I agree.
But I like that idea a lot. I think
yeah, I like it.
I mean, we're probably going to see that this weekend, Labor Day weekend. Everybody's out and about on their private boat.
Yeah.
In the bay, in the harbor, at the islands.
Just Mission Bay on a holiday weekend just freaks me out.
No, it stresses me out. I won't go.
Yeah.
Just driving over the Ingram Street Bridge and you see like jet skis going 900 different directions at 70 miles an hour and you're like, oh my gosh.
That person's drunk. That person's not paying attention.
Yep.
Oh, it's horrible. Oof.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Oh, it gives me anxiety.
It's almost like the holidays that qualified captain looks forward to.
Yes.
For content.
Yeah, content.
Kook of the day, qualified captain.
Yeah. Although I was saying this to my wife yesterday or this morning. I do appreciate that qualified captain is not just a social channel anymore that just makes fun of people who don't know what they're doing. They're taking an opportunity to educate people on safe boating practices.
Yeah.
And that's like a pretty heavy mix of their content is actually educational stuff, and I think that's very smart.
Yeah,
with their following, I mean, I would take the opportunity to do that too. I think it's responsible.
Yeah, it's a golden opportunity.
Yeah.
For sure.
Good job, qualified captain.
Yeah.
Good job. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Well, I got two more. The first one is, what is something that we always stress when it comes to gear maintenance, or even breaking down gear or whatnot? What is one thing that we always stress that you yourself do not have a habit of doing?
I don't always rinse down my rods.
Oh no.
Sometimes I wait an extra day.
Okay, that's
because I'm tired and it's just me and I'm in an apartment. I gotta lug my rods from downstairs or my parking garages, and then I go upstairs and I got all my stuff, and then I have 2 feet of backyard, and then I put my rods outside. It's just, forgive me, guys.
Process.
I just can't do it all the time.
I'm pretty good about rinsing stuff off. Sometimes I have too much faith in humanity, and I leave stuff out, either in my front yard or in the back of my truck for a day.
Oh boy.
So if you know where I live, don't come steal my equipment. Man, that's tough. Putting fresh line on stuff is a big one. And I'm pretty good about it, but sometimes I push it a little bit.
Definitely guilty of that.
If I was as a charter boat operator, the most frustrating thing is when people have too much faith in their line that's been on their reel for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And you're just waiting for something bad to happen, and inevitably it will, and it does. And then with my freshwater stuff, sometimes I'll recycle leaders, and it's just fail. It's just preparing to fail.
Yeah.
When you're talking about 8 and 12 pound test, and you're just like, I think it's fine. I'm not going to put fresh leaders on.
Yeah.
Like, just do it.
That will be the time.
So that was me. I had actually the first day I fished Barrett, I was like, that morning I was just breaking fish off like left and right for a couple hours. And then I was like, okay, I got to slow down and just put fresh stuff on.
I was going to say,
my
is this
brother
something
was
you
like,
realize?
My brother was like, oh yeah, I realized it. It was intentional. I was too tired, and I was like, this is probably fine. But my brother was like, oh, that's what you get for not tying fresh leaders on. I'm like, yeah, this is about the 3rd trip these leaders have been on. And it's just, you get a crispy piece of 8 pound, and it's just not very strong anymore. So just take 10, 15, whatever, how long ever, to just take a little bit of time and put fresh leader on.
Yeah.
I loved when people would come on the boat and we'd be like, getting everyone tied up and situated, and someone hands you like an old pen ugly stick with like a senator on it, and it's got like a little bit of Dacron on it, and then it's just filled with like 50 or 60 pound mono, but there's a slight tint to it.
Oh yeah.
And then there's just a layer of like grease and dust that are like in between the spool and like the bar on the top, and then in the handle it's like dusty grease, and you go to ask the person like, hey, when's the last time you used this thing? And they hit you with let's see. And it's like, that's all I need to know, guy.
Yeah.
You could have spent $20 to get a rental rod.
Yeah.
Moral of the story is, don't be afraid to get a rental rod. The rental equipment's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's maintained.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's probably better maintained.
If you're gonna go fishing 3 times a year, like there's no shame in renting stuff. Just do it. It's
be far
good
cheaper.
Equipment.
No, and the deckhands already know as soon as a rental rod's on the boat, you don't even have to like do anything about it because everyone's gonna make sure your rental is tied up and ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's why people with rental rods on boats get
catch
bit.
fish.
I'm telling you right now.
Yeah,
that's
100%.
Why. It's a thing.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, dialed.
Yeah,
I could be better about putting fresh leaders on sometimes.
Yeah,
that's my shame.
I think I'm guilty of both, but I think more often than not, I think Tonie, you're right. Where it's like I'm usually getting back 10 o'clock. It's like, man, I just want to go to bed.
Just do it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say it's typically it's less than 24 hours for sure. It's usually like the next morning.
I picked up a hot tip from somebody at Fisherman's Landing. What's the long-haired dude's
Vince?
name? Yeah. With this like anti-corrosive spray stuff. This was a few years ago. And I use it now, and it seems to work pretty well. Like less salt buildup.
Nice. Gear maintenance too. Like setting in reels for service and all that.
I don't do that.
Yeah.
I just thought of one. This one, I'm like, out of all the things, this one is something that I'm really like OCD about. Like if I know I'm not going to be fishing for a while, I'll set my drag super, super loose on all my rods.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. That I won't rinse down my rod or my reels, but the drag is for sure. It's just gonna last.
Oh,
you're 50% of the way there if you do that.
Yeah.
I feel like they cancel each other out.
Yeah. For sure.
Once you get that stuff moving again, that's fine.
Yeah.
You just get it wet, get it moving.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. How this one's a little bit off the wall. How do you keep, you go on a fishing trip, typically you don't have cell reception or anything. How do you keep your mind clear while you're fishing?
There's just nothing in my brain to begin with, Chris.
I was gonna say it's effortless. Part of the draw for me fishing is that I go out there and it's literally the only thing on my mind.
Yeah.
It's just automatic. I do, like, as more time on the water goes by, I definitely start to miss my family a little bit, but I have a Zolio and I can text freely and it's good. But yeah, like when I step on that boat, there's nothing else going on in my head.
Yeah.
Zolios are nice.
It's nice. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not thinking about anything. It's the same thing with surfing. Like your mind is focused on that next set or moving into position on a peak or not, if it's big, like not getting clobbered. So you're just so hyper focused. For me, there's nothing else going on in my head.
Nice.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. But I think aside from that, if I had to choose another thing on how to keep myself occupied, I always have a book with me. I like to read. I like when like everyone's asleep and I'm the only person in the galley and you can just hear the boat moving on anchor and you can hear the water like lapping on the sides and I can just sit there in total peace and read my book.
That is one luxury of a big boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a skiff, you're kind of always making sure you're not going to die. So
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, like sitting on the anchor in the anchorage at Clemente is pretty cozy sometimes. But yeah, that is one nice thing about a big boat.
Yeah. We had this conversation the other day.
Did we?
It's like it's an opportunity especially when no one's in the galley where it's like nobody's talking to you. You're just basically just
yeah.
peace and quiet. And then you have I mean, no offense to the old guys, but the old guys always seem to come and sit in the booth that's right next to you and wanting to start a conversation. I'm like, I just want to relax.
Some people are just storytellers.
Some people are.
I'm that
that's
way.
Okay. That's totally fine.
When I get old, I'm just going to have all kinds of stories to tell people.
Oh, I'm not going to shut up when I'm older. I already know.
You're going to be that person.
100%.
Yeah. I can already see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, just like what Howie was talking about earlier, like there's a lot of people that don't tell these stories. Like you tell stories so people can learn and listen and like experience things through your eyes. Like that, I feel like is going to be my way of telling people like.
It's your contribution to society.
Yeah, whether or not people do anything with it. I mean, at least the words came out of my mouth and they're out there.
You did your part.
Yeah.
I like listening to old time stories about how stuff used to be, and like, you know what I mean?
It's history.
I grew up. My grandpa was a big storyteller, and he had all kinds of stories about the Wild West and all this stuff that was like we'd just go to his house and he'd just tell us stories for hours. It was pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why all this stuff exists now, like podcast material and equipment.
My grandpa grew up in the early 1900s in Kern County.
Oh.
So he was just
Farmer.
going around on horseback and...
Farmer or oil?
Did you just assume his occupation?
It was a question.
You know, he was a railroad worker.
Oh, okay.
But like as a kid, his stories were just of kind of people in his community. And he would do odd jobs for people, like riding on horseback around here and there, delivering stuff and whatever. I don't know.
Nice.
Picking up people who lost a gunfight from up in the hills and bringing them back down and things like that.
I would have loved to be alive like in like the 1890s.
Yeah.
You know, simpler
It's
times.
an interesting time period.
Yeah, he knew a guy, actually, one of his, neighbors, I don't know, he probably lived 5 miles away, but had raised a baby mountain lion.
Oh, no kidding.
And so he had all these stories about this baby mountain lion, and yeah.
Nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Not everyone can say that, for sure.
No. I don't want to have anything to do with a wild mountain lion.
Neither do I. Neither do I. Well, guys, this has been fun. It's been over an hour. Any last words or thoughts from you guys?
No, it's been a couple hectic weeks, and it's nice to sit down and just chat fishing with you guys for a little bit.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, no agenda, just a couple random questions and conversations. I like it.
Now everybody knows my search history.
Yeah. Well, guys, that is going to do it for this edition of the CCA California podcast. Make sure to go like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and we will see you guys next week. Take care.